XRP to $100,000? Here's how. There are experts out there that are predicting the price to go up to $100,000 at least for XRP. How is this going to happen? Well, they believe that the idea is that massive entities start tokenizing assets on the XRP ledger and essentially holding value on the XRP ledger. This will limit the supply of XRP that is available to use for on-demand liquidity. When you've got a smaller supply of tokens to use for the on-demand liquidity and a higher amount of transactions to use those small tokens with, the price of an XRP has to skyrocket. XRP to 100,000.
Recently, the XRP community has been buzzing off the highs of the latest video from Brad Garlinghouse and team surrounding the bombshell news that the SEC is going to be dropping their appeal altogether, which truly puts XRP in a position of power moving forward. And although price pumped on the news, many are beginning to speculate that the ETFs come next, and some are even speculating that there's a situation going on where they're ready to flip the switch on the XRPL and essentially merge it with the private ledger, where many believe that the value of the token is far higher, which has led some analysts that the price of one XRP token will be upwards of $10,000, and in the prior video that you just saw, up to $100,000 per token when you consider scale, demand, scarcity in terms of asset tokenization, and then obviously combining it with the private ledger. But how much truth to these claims is there? Well, here's what we actually know to be true. Currently, the price of XRP is about $2.40 some cents. XRP has been checking off all of the boxes, and yesterday another big box was checked off. First and foremost, Gary Gensler resigned from the SEC, which marked a huge turning point over at that agency and how they dealt with crypto. We know that back a while ago, Ripple and CEO Brad Garlinghouse even had private meetings with Trump and the administration, and then they joined for the first ever crypto summit at the White House. Some of the biggest news was the fact that Trump stated XRP would be added to the Strategic National Crypto Reserve. Even Brad Garlinghouse had comments on it.
Why do you think XRP wasn't specifically named in the executive order for the digital asset stockpile?
Well, so XRP was named by the president on Truth Social. He posted something saying that there should be other tokens, that there's going to be a Bitcoin strategic reserve and then a crypto stockpile that would include things like XRP.
But days later, the executive order didn't include it. Why was that?
I don't know what specifically was in the executive order. My understanding is there's going to be a Bitcoin strategic reserve. There'll be a crypto stockpile representing other cryptos. And I would expect that will include XRP. Look, at the end of the day, I think the stark contrast is in the Biden administration, we couldn't get a meeting with people at the White House. Now we're welcomed into the White House. And that's just a massive change. I think we want this industry to thrive in the United States. We don't want to push it offshore where you have fewer regulations.
And now, just because of yesterday's outcome, the Ripple case is practically over, which leaves one last box to check off, and that would be the advent of a Ripple ETF. Now, many have been filed, but none have currently been approved. However, many speculate BlackRock is likely already prepared their paperwork and will get approved, which will then lead the rest of the market. And as you can see, that the betting odds on that Ripple ETF since yesterday have really pumped a lot higher. So the odds are in the betting market about 82% chance that we get approval in 2025. However, before or after we see the ETFs, people think that we're going to see a merge with the private ledgers, which were designed for central bank digital currencies. So what's really going on behind the scenes, and how high can XRP potentially go in upcoming months upon all of this bullish news? Well, in this short video from Jake Claver, he shares some truly unique information that nobody's ever shared before from a private conversation he had with David Schwartz, the CTO of Ripple, and what's truly going on behind closed doors between XRP, banks, and the private ledgers. Then we'll share a post from the very well-known David Schwartz, CTO of Ripple, talking about these topics so we can actually get to the truth, because it's a magnitude of difference on whether or not XRP actually reaches $10,000 or even $100,000, and the value being rehypothecated to these prices within the upcoming months or years. And how do you approach XRP and the crypto markets over the upcoming week and month anyways? So stay tuned, because I'll reveal all. And as always, if you're feeling blessed and bullish, comment 777. And if you're going to be the wealthiest person in your family tree, smash the subscribe button. Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Paul, and you can find me on Twitter or X at PauliDefi, PauliDefi. Now I'm going to keep hammering it and drilling it that Altcoin Pro University is your one-stop shop for all of the right tools, training, and resources to become a crypto expert in no time flat. And at the end of the day, if you have any goals when it comes to your investment portfolio with crypto, we have everything you need to reach those goals. Now, I can't guarantee that you're going to get any result, right? Crypto is obviously volatile, it's risky, but we hope to reduce the risk that you take by entering markets with the proper education. So not only do we offer all sorts of courses and classes, but we do live calls. And every Tuesday, I also host a private live call for all of our community members where I teach them everything they need to know about fundamental and arguably technical analysis. It's considered a technical analysis call, but I start to think fundamentally constantly when I'm doing these calls. And I start to look for confluences in how these things operate to really get good signals about what comes next in markets. This is stuff that I only train inside of our university for our private members. We have over 1K paying members to be here, and these people are all taking it very seriously. So our community is bar none some of the best in the space. You get all sorts of questions answered from our team of researchers and experts and pros, whether it comes to DeFi yields, whether it comes to putting your money to work, whether it comes to getting airdrops or altcoin picks, you name it. Altcoin Pro University is one of the best on the planet, and I actually stand by that considering I'm sharing it with you. And I've been doing crypto for a very long time. We have a 30-day no questions asked money back guarantee. So all you have to do is check our bio, get the link below for bullrunners.com. You can watch the video to see what's offered on the other side. And once you do, you get access to all of the value that I just shared, including live calls with not only myself, but our team of researchers and experts to get your questions answered and become a crypto pro. So head to the link below, bullrunners.com, and let's get into the rest of the video. Okay, first I want to start with the pretext and context behind this video of Brad Garlinghouse talking about his opinion on Bitcoin, because I believe a lot of people share a lot of things online. Very little information is actually true. And so Brad Garlinghouse makes an interesting point here at the Digital Asset Summit 2025 in New York. Let's listen to what he says.
What is your opinion of Bitcoin, and do you own any?
Look, I'm glad you asked this, because I do think there is both misinformation and disinformation, and people say shit that they know isn't true. I own Bitcoin. I've owned Bitcoin for a long time. I first bought Bitcoin in 2012, coming out of an event when I was first introduced to it. And I am bullish on Bitcoin, period, full stop. I'll leave it at that. Like, there's lots of other things that people say about me, and I don't think I've ever tried to be anti-Bitcoin. There are things around that statement that people will say, oh, well, Brad said Bitcoin is controlled by China. My response to that is there was a period of time where a vast majority of Bitcoin mining was in China. That is no longer the case, and I think that's good for the industry.
And you own Bitcoin through that period anyway?
For sure, yeah. I don't remember when I last... I've used Bitcoin. I'm not sure I've sold Bitcoin. I've used Bitcoin for various transactions, but I haven't sold it.
And so now let's take that into consideration, that there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation online, that even Brad Garlinghouse is very bullish on Bitcoin. Why wouldn't he be? He wants to be pro crypto across the board. And Bitcoin is by far the largest crypto by market cap, which accounts for more than 60% of all of the money in crypto. So posts like this, where we get $100,000 on X XRP sound very attractive, and they get a lot of traction online because it's a bag bias where people hold a crypto asset, and when they see very bullish prices or news, they tend to buy into it and hold for the sake of believing that it's going to hit this price, which will make them very rich. Or for example, from Rowan Exchange, they posted not long ago that there is a $10,000 XRP price prediction, which isn't crazy. It's actually conservative. However, they used ChatGPT to do this. And you could argue, well, is that the arbiter of truth? How did they ask all of these questions? What did they say beforehand? We simply don't know. In other words, you can lead these LLMs to give you an answer that you would like. Like, is it actually that crazy for it to hit this number? Then what it's doing is it's working backwards and saying, in order for it to hit this number, here's what would happen. If these things happened, then it's not that crazy. But honestly, a $10,000 XRP price prediction is insane, considering you would need hundreds of billions of dollars flowing into XRP all at once and virtually no sell pressure. And so then there's other theories that, well, that's going to happen with ETFs, or that's going to happen when there's a merge on the private ledgers, right? There's so many wild theories surrounding why XRP could hit this, but at the end of the day, there is only one XRP asset. It's a completely public blockchain, which means everyone, it's transparent, can go and look at the numbers. They can go and look at the transactions. No one's doing anything on any other chain that's going to affect it. And here we have Jake Claver talking about that conversation he had with Ripple CTO.
There are private permission ledgers that are replicas of the XRPL that Ripple has trialed with institutions that are, potentially side chains or derivatives of the XRPL, but there is no other XRP. There's only one XRP. Now, when those transactions between counterparties that may be trusted start moving over the mainnet and move through XRP as the liquidity tool, or the DEX routes them that way because it's cheaper than, moving them between counterparties in a trusted ecosystem, or the other counterparties no longer trust each other and they don't want to hold each other's stable coins, then yeah, that liquidity would then move into XRP, and so would that volume to be able to move the price substantially higher. But so if, there are quote unquote private ledgers that Ripple has trialed with these banks, which they have, we've talked to them about it. There will be some type of merge. We asked Ripple this. I've been to Swell. We've talked to them about it. I've asked David Schwartz this specifically. There are not two ledgers for XRP. There is the mainnet. The only asset on the mainnet is XRP. Ripple has created privatized versions of the XRPL that they have trialed with institutions. Okay, just like they did with Bank of America. They have with the Bank of England. They have with other large institutions.
And so really what he's referring to here is the fact that XRP is the asset on the XRPL. Now, a company like Ripple can take all of the code and the technology that they've built and use that infrastructure to build another blockchain for another country or another bank. But at the end of the day, and it's good technology, right? You're still going to get that same amount of friction and speed and time to finality on transactions. But at the end of the day, these are separate ledgers and blockchains. And guess what? Ripple, being a company, wants to earn income by building technologies out for other companies. In the same way, Larry Ellison became very wealthy building out a company called Oracle, which is really just a technology company that helps other companies properly store and use data. Okay, so they are offering a service and earning income on the back end. We do the same thing in our companies. We can take our product or our code and spin it off for someone else, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's the one. And my goal is to earn revenue on it. And so here shortly, I'm going to drop a bombshell directly from the Ripple CTO on what he shares about all of this misinformation online. But it's important to remember, Ripple is actually a company. You can come over to Crunchbase and look up Ripple. They have a great growth score. They have a great heat score. They have a great CB rank. However, they have raised $293.8 million over 15 rounds with some major investors and VCs. Why? Because they are a company. Their biggest asset that they hold in escrow is XRP. And as a company, they are going to move forward with the idea that they want to hold strong assets over sustained periods of time. And by the way, they're not just going to ditch or burn all of their money, because that would not be proper in how you deal with your venture capital. The goal of any company is returns. And to further prove my point, let's listen to Brad Garlinghouse on the company.
And let's talk about the next phase. One thing I'm really wondering about now that there's more clarity for you is that is an IPO, frankly, in your future now. We talk so much about the potential for the XRP token to be wrapped in an ETF. That is a method of listing. Right. So is listing possible now for you for Ripple?
Well, it's certainly something that is possible. The United States SEC under Gensler was so hostile to this industry. I mean, ironically, they approved the S1 from Coinbase and then sued them for doing the things they said they were doing. So this SEC, fortunately, is going to be, I think, very constructive and positive for this industry. So I think that's available. And I think the company's at a stage where we could consider that. That being said, it isn't a huge priority. I think most companies are going public. Raising capital is something that is high on their radar. We have been in a very fortunate position to be able to grow the business organically. We're also, frankly, more proactive in looking at acquisitions. This is an industry that finally is going to be able to thrive in the United States, the largest economy in the world. And I think the industry is still underestimating the shift from the headwinds to the tailwinds. That's going to make a bigger difference than people think. And finally, the U.S. market is really unlocked.
And to tell you what he's not saying there is that they are a company. They could IPO. Why? Because they are a company. However, most companies IPO or go public in order to raise capital from the markets. That's what going public means. They are a company. Could they go public under a proper SEC? Yes. Do they actually need to? No. Why? They're fortunate because they've had a lot of organic growth, which means the assets that they currently hold have gone up tremendously in value due to the markets, due to participants, due to a lot of actual misinformation online as well. But that still leaves them with a lot of money, a huge stockpile of cash and value in the XRP token. And as David Schwartz said it once, he said, expect XRP, or better yet, Ripple, to act in its best interest for itself and its investors. So let's get into this bombshell post from David, which I think is really interesting and unique. The fact that it was posted in 2023 and still addresses the majority of misinformation or rumors out there. In other words, he's basically stating XRP can't be pegged to gold, silver, or anything else. He said, in theory, you can. However, I don't know why anyone would actually do that, because there's no real incentive. XRP can't magically become a stablecoin. Someone could offer to redeem XRP at some fixed rate for something else to set a floor price, but why would anyone want to do that? Why wouldn't they just issue a stablecoin, which is exactly what Ripple did with RLUSD? So it really makes zero sense to go and make it a stablecoin. Stablecoins issued on the XRPL are not XRP. You can redeem for stablecoins or vice versa, but unlike XRP, it simply doesn't work that way. Finally, two major claims which are really interesting. XRP has nothing to do with ISO 222, and that's true. ISO 222 is a messaging standard for payments that will be used by Swift. However, XRP itself is a security. Now, you can have projects that maybe take XRP and send it using an ISO 222 messaging standard, but that's still going to have to happen on the public ledger and the blockchain. Or better yet, XRP can only exist on XRPL. The XRPL is the authoritative record, and here's the key point, of XRP ownership. You can create XRP denominated assets elsewhere. Okay, so you can denominate something as XRP, but unless there's somehow one-to-one tied to XRP in the same way, let's say a stable coin, which is actually tied to the US dollar, it wouldn't be legit otherwise. It would simply be a derivative or an IOU. And so much of this was actually confirmed right here in this video. Let's have a listen.
But the question is, will the value of XRP be the same in the private ledgers as it is on the public? Yes.
the value proposition of XRP is that it has these liquidity pools. It doesn't make sense to isolate something. Like there's no place where gold is worth twice as much as it is now, because if there was, people would just bring gold there and they would buy gold somewhere else and they would sell it.
Think about what he just said. If there were two different prices in two different areas, people would go buy on the public ledger and bring it into the private ledger, or vice versa. So when people are saying, well, I've seen the private ledger and it was like $10,000 per XRP, maybe they saw a photo that was doctored online and had private ledger somewhere in there, and they're confirming to everyone that that's what they saw and believe. Just because someone saw it online doesn't mean it's true. Ultimately, this is how arbitrage works. If the price is higher in one area of the world of something else, maybe I buy it over, in a cheaper portion of the world, bring it to the more expensive portion of the world, sell it there, and take the difference on the same product. This is exactly what he's saying.
Unless the only way that you can have the value be very different in two places is if there's a lot of friction. And if there's friction, someone will make a business of removing that friction. So I don't see any realistic scenario where XRP has significantly different value unless something's wrong. Like a good example of a case, there was a time where the value of XRP, they called it the kimchi premium, right? Where the value of XRP in some Asian countries was very high, but that was because there were capital controls, right? That was because things were bad. I think that's a sign that something is not going well. The value proposition of XRP is that you can take it to all of the places, right? If I sell you some gold and you say, hey, this gold can only be used in jewelry, you're like, well, that kind of sucks. I don't want that gold, right? The value proposition of gold is that you have access to the entire value proposition of gold. And so I don't see any scenario in which where it makes sense to snip pieces off.
In other words, the value proposition of XRP is that I can take an XRP denominated as XRP at the current price that is market valued, okay, $2 and let's just say 40 cents, and then send that somewhere else where it might be $2.38 or $2.40. But at the end of the day, those differentials become less and less spread as the market expands, as there's more interest, as there's potential arbitrage opportunities, which is what he's saying. And so real value propositions in anything that is an asset is that it is fungible, okay? And this is arguably a case study in money. A one-for-one value on a transparent public ledger. Someone says, well, now XRP has to be money, but that's also not true, because then why would Ripple introduce a stable coin? So these claims really have to be thought about, and arguably the claim surrounding $100,000 or $10,000 per token is erroneous and ridiculous. And I get it. I'm gonna get a ton of hate in the comments, but go ahead. You can wait for a $10,000 XRP. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you can laugh at my face years from now. But as things stand currently, I would argue it's going to be extremely difficult, if not impossible, for XRP to reach those prices unless they burn all of the supply of their token in the escrow. And again, I don't see any company that has actually taken in money from investors doing that, because that would not be in their best interest. They are literally burning up their cash. And gosh, I really don't want to be that guy. I don't enjoy telling people, hey, you don't want to believe all of this stuff because some of it may not be true, but that's the reality and that is the truth. Now on the daily, okay, we're going to look at the chart really quickly. We're not going to spend too much time. Where we got the news from Brad Garlinghouse and team, the price did pump a decent amount from the low to the high of about 13%, currently up about 12% on the day. Since yesterday, we are now down to about a 6.7% gain. And typically markets and everyone's kind of been pissed off about the fact that it didn't rally far harder upon the news of the appeal being dropped. However, we're currently still in an intermediate term downtrend. And the fact that we failed upon that extremely important news to pump above the $3 price right up here leads me to believe that this thing is likely going to go lower, especially when you go ahead and turn off those wicks. Now, that's not something people like hearing, but the reality is we're currently in a downtrend, okay? An intermediate term downtrend. Here was the high. Here was the next high. If you paint the major lows between the range, we're consistently getting one low is lower than the previous low. This low is lower than the previous low. This high is lower than this high. And if this marks the local high, then and then we don't even pump up to here, up to at least 270, chances are we're going to put in a new lower low. If we break below, and let me turn those wicks back on so we have a bit more context, our range support right here down to $1.95 and $2. One more time, chances are we're dumping hard because there's just so much air between the move from about 64 cents up to about $2.70, which leads me to believe we are going to be supported somewhere in here between 150 down to even $1.10. So if we break below $2, watch out, because these ranges are coming. And for those of you guys who want to be longer term investors in an asset like XRP, which I think is a strong company, I think they're going to grow over time. At the end of the day, just be prepared for a potential dump down to 150 in an environment where everything is kind of struggling to do much of anything else, as the S&P 500 and all of the markets are down, and even the VIX has risen tremendously. Volatility is up because people are uncertain, and that will carry over into the crypto markets, no matter how good your company is. So anyways, if you don't absolutely hate me by now, I'm just sharing my personal opinions and what I found after doing tons of homework and research into this product in particular, and more specifically into companies and investing. I've learned all of the hard lessons, and we've built a really strong team of people who have done the same over at Altcoin Pro University. So head down to bullrunners.com and check out that link, and then from there you can check out our university library. You can check out all of our strategies and guides and resources and tools, and get all sorts of questions answered, and have all sorts of community members asking questions that are going to teach you and learn from. At the end of the day, this is the best platform on planet Earth, and it's not just the posts, but it's also our calendar of live calls that we consistently host, and we are going to be adding to this calendar over time. So there's going to be no excuse for you to fail in the world of crypto. Anywho, thanks so much for watching the video. Be sure to subscribe. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Head to bullrunners.com, and goodbye.